If you are watching by way of Facebook, I want you to call your friends and share right now. Will you do that? You say, well, are you really sold on it? I am, because the Lord gave me this message here. I had the other one, and I just let it go. I can't describe that. My wife said I would be petrified if that ever happened to me, and I made a few notes. I'm going on with God today. These words kept coming back to me over and over again from John chapter 15 and verse 13, where Jesus said, greater love hath no man than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends. Now, over these past years, since we've been a republic, we've had some laying down of life for friends. We've had some people who gave up home, who gave up big plantations, who gave all of their wealth. They were wealthy. They even gave their lives to sign that Declaration of Independence and that Constitution that we have lived by so beautifully over these last few hundred years. We have been blessed because of the gifts of a few. We are not the only ones who have noticed it. Others have noticed it down through the years. And they noticed it more after the Civil War, when North was fighting against South and South was fighting against North and fighting for what they believed was right. That's not for me to decide what they've done. What they've done is history. And as the old judge told me one time here, Judge Nemox, he said, Pastor, the deed is done. But as these young men and women, mainly men at the time, died in battle, in combat, they couldn't even get them back to the North or get them down to the South, to their respective states. So they buried them with a little marker of some kind, a stick that was tied together, two of them, or maybe some stones. But there were so many in some of those battles that they didn't have time to give them a decent burial. And so one bright morning, some people in the South, they said it, and then the North said they did it, saw these graves, and it was around May, the last of May. I've often wondered why it was the last of May. Maybe it was because the flowers are more plentiful in May. They picked flowers like these right here and carried them out to the graves. And down in Mississippi and Louisiana, they said, our boys have died, but we're going to at least dress up their graves. And some looked at it and said, but isn't it a shame that they died on the other side too and couldn't be buried by their loved ones? And they'll never even see their graves. But why can't we make them pretty too? And those women took those wreaths and those bouquets, and they took those flags out and draped those graves from the North and from the South. And it became so beautiful and so notorious if that's a halfway good word to use, that they called it not Memorial Day, but they called it at the last of the month of May, Decoration Sunday. They made a show of it. Then they started adding lemonade and anything that they had to eat the way they did it, and having parties and everything. And the South said, we were the first to do that. And then somebody from way up in Illinois said, oh no, we did it before you did. And then one of those wahoos came out of Richmond, Virginia, and said, all of y'all are wrong. And we can't tell a lie because we're from Virginia. We're cavalier. We did it first. And each year somebody would come up and say, oh, it started over here first. Until finally President Lyndon Baines Johnson from down in the great state of Texas said, I'm tired of all of this fighting about where it took place first. And they set up Waterloo, New York, because the year before they had decorated those graves and had such gala that he said, I believe that this would be a good place, and Congress passed it then in the 1960s and declared that this day in May would be declared not Decoration Day, but it would be declared as the Memorial Day, in memoriam, where we pay homage and give thanks to people who never got a chance to see their children graduate, who never got a chance to get married, who never had an opportunity to have children, who never was able to finish their destiny that was written in granite by the finger of God. And they gave their all for what they believed that was right. And today, some 50 years, 60 years later, we are still paying tribute to the men, and then now we have a lot of women soldiers who took the lead and the bullets and the bombs in order for us to have a more perfect union. Of course, we say, well, are we the first? And I think that the ones who did it first did it 2,300 years ago. I was just born at the time, getting ready to be weaned. And a man by the name of Pericles in Greece saw his men come back from the Peloponnesian War. And he said, let's pay homage to the Greeks who died for our cause. So it can be firsthand. The good news is that we love and honor our men and our women enough that we will remember. We will not forget the brave deeds that they did. I've wondered why all this war in the first place. I'm not the first who's ever wondered it. You've wondered it also. And I am sure that when men are in the jungles of Vietnam, or on those hills over in Korea, think about it and see the danger, they wonder, why are we fighting each other? And I managed to pick up, you're not going to get it, but I mean, it's fun to get things like this sometimes. You see them moving real funny in movies. A story was written by a chairman. I can't get his name right now. but it's called All's Quiet on the Western Front. Now that one goes back. That'll show you how young I am, okay? But it was done when movies were coming on in the 40s and 50s, even though it was written in the early 1900s. And four of the guys, a bunch of them were sitting there asking about war and why we have war. And one of them said, well, it's because countries get mad at each other and they fight it out. And one of them said, well, you mean the country itself, the land itself gets mad at the other land and they get against each other and fight it out? And the other one said, no, crazy. It's when somebody gets mad at somebody on the other side and decides that they are going to get even because they're mad. And when he said that in the movie, the whole movie, one of the guys grabs his rifle and his gear and starts out. And they yell back and say, where are you going, boy? And he said, I'm getting out of here right now and going back home because I ain't mad at nobody. We ain't mad at nobody. Now you think how the bombing of Hiroshima took place, and then a few years later, in 1963, I would have a young man in my English class, in the most accelerated class that is, as a junior, by the name of Alan Matsumoto from Japan. One of the smartest kids I ever met. He made me stay on my knees all night long. I want you to know that, and in the books. That just 2 decades later, we've got him, a part of them, over here with us. And we are trading, and we have people married and are married, and we're going there, and they're coming here, and the war's over. And those very people that were our enemies then are now our friends when it comes to speaking up to Xi and to Putin. War is funny. All's quiet on the Western Front. He was easygoing, but he was a man for the hour. When we elected him, now understand this, I was a child at this time. Dwight D. David Eisenhower. If I'm not mistaken, I'm not sure who he beat. I believe it was Stevenson, wasn't it? Something like that. Adlai Stevenson, another smart man. But Eisenhower made his way down one day to Gettysburg. I want to ask you this. Nobody here but us, is that right? How many of you have ever visited the Sacred Hall, the rotunda-like thing there with glass all around it at Gettysburg? Let me see your hand. If you have not, you owe it to yourself to go and see that. It will come in on you. Am I right? It will come in on you and you'll feel like you're there. I'm sure you wouldn't if you had been there, and they'd say that's a drop in the bucket. Eisenhower was there, and as he explained to the people with him in his entourage, now this is the way the North fought, this is the way the South fought, these are the schemes and whatever else plans that you use to fight with. One of the things that was said, and he quoted it that day, he says, well, this is where they got it for us. And somebody asked him, Mr. President, what do you mean by that? This is where they got it for us. And he said, because it was this sacred soil that helped to preserve this union, to save our nation. Like all others, like at Corregidor, when Wainwright said, there is no soil so sacred as that of Corregidor. Joy, a real thrill to be there and to see it, a deserted place there off of Manila. And then to go to the wall that is so sacred at Manila and see hundreds and thousands of names engraved there that gave their life from around the world, and they weren't planted back home or anywhere else. And many of them never had a cross or a grave. And each year at 3 p.m, we have that tribute to the unknown soldier. And the Mr. President goes there and the others to let everybody know that we will not forget. We will not forget Hiroshima. We will not forget what we did. We will not forget Pearl Harbor. We will not forget the Twin Towers. We will not forget the hills and the plains in the Middle East. We will not forget those tyrants that took our liberty and that slew people by the thousands. And we will not forget a Hitler who cooked and gassed 6 million people at one time. And to stand in those gas chambers there will hurt you. We will not forget a Mussolini. We will not forget a Putin. And we will not forget a Joe Stalin, who killed more than Hitler ever dreamed of killing, or a Lenin. Why would you want to be like them, to take the lives of people? I ask anybody in this nation that question. It's sacred soil that we have. And when you get on it, act like it. Just don't go there if you can't be sacred. If you've got to cut up, don't go. Because I'm telling you, God has it for the nations that love him. I don't know how true it is, but I heard the story of before Hitler ever really started his fighting, making one of those tirades of a speech. And he looked down and he saw a young man sitting there laughing, he thought. And it got the best of Adolf Hitler. And at the end, he came over and asked him, he says, I noticed that while I was speaking, you were laughing. The young man said, sir, I was not laughing. He said, I was thinking. He said, what were you thinking about? He said, well, I was thinking about my people. And he knew that he was a Jew. He knew this man, Hitler knew he was a Jew. Had it all over him. And he said, and he was speaking about Jews and how he didn't like them. He said, I was thinking while you were talking and speaking about how long ago so many people started hating us Jews, anti-Semitism. And he said, I remember, look back, all the way back to a man named the Pharaoh. And the Pharaoh made us bear burdens on us and hurt us. And the Pharaoh was evil and killed and slew people and had a hard heart. And I want you to know, he said, sir, we still remember what Pharaoh did. And now we have a service and a ceremony called the Passover. And when we celebrate the Passover, we have a little cake with 4 squares in it, or 3 squares in it, I think, he said. He said, with those 3 squares, when we eat that little piece of cake, we remember the Pharaoh and that he tried to annihilate the Jew, but he didn't succeed. And later down the line, there was a man named Haman who hated the Jews. He said, I'll make them extinct during the reign of Ahasuerus. And he tried his best to kill them. But he said he couldn't do it, sir. He says, and now, because of that, when we have a ceremony, we have it called the ceremony of Purim. And he said, because of Haman, we now have a little cake down on our plate with 4 corners to it. And we eat that thing to remember that he tried to kill the Jew and he couldn't. Then he said, sir, the reason I was chuckling to myself thinking is because I was trying to wonder what kind of cake we're going to get and eat to remember you. Now, I can't tell you that that's true, like nobody can tell you if anything is true. But I'm telling you, they've tried it all the way from Herod all the way to now, and they've tried to kill the Jew, and they can't kill him. And they'll never do away with the patriotism and love that we have for freedom that we have in this country. Billy Graham said that he was in Seoul, Korea, and they took him to where the boys were fighting, the men were fighting. He saw a young man who had just been hit by a roadside bomb, but turned him inside out and twisted him, and they couldn't shape him up, couldn't straighten him up. Lying on his stomach there, he reached out to take his cold, clammy hand. And they said, the doctor said, if he does live, he will be crippled. He will never be able to move out of that position where he sleeps on his stomach and stays there for the rest of his life. And Graham took him by the hand and prayed a prayer for him. And he said, the young man cocked his eye around and he said, sir, he said, it's happened, but it will be worth it all if America stays free. Now, I know this. There are a lot of people like Dave Reaver and a lot of people like those from this area who have died, who've fallen on bombs, grenades, so that others wouldn't die. They're the great ones. And that brought me to my topic. Jesus said, no greater love has any man that a man lay down his life for his friends. But it took me to another place, a battlefield that was greater than any battlefield that any man ever got on. It was on a hill called Golgotha at Calvary, when the Son of God fought it out alone against every demon force from hell, and they tried to kill him, and they finally did kill him, and they buried him in a grave. But just before he died, he said, Father, can I have your hand? And he put out his hand and took the hand of God, his Father, and he reached out and he took broken humanity and pulled those hands together and put them there. And defeat met grace. Damnation met heaven. Hell was ruined and because of heaven there that day, because of what Jesus did. And he uttered the words that has been your salvation and mine, to say that he won. He said, it is finished. You can come to heaven now. Go ahead and praise him. It's all right. Jesus laid down his life for every one of us. No wonder we have this thing on Sunday mornings, ma'am, when we praise him. We're coming here to sing and shout and to hear you guys sing with the greatest choir. I'm telling you, this is something else. I mean, I've felt bad walking in here sometimes, but when I hear you all, I mean, let's go up. But it's more than all of that, isn't it? You've come here to worship a risen Savior. He's in the world today. I know that he is living, whatever men may say. I see his hand of mercy. I hear his voice of cheer. And just the time I need him, he says, I'm right here with you. Praise God. That's my Christ. Will you stand up with me?